Góðan daginn. Hi, welcome back to Icelandic for Foreigners. In this episode, we're going to be looking at the differences between Þekkja, Vita, and Kunna. So why do we need a specific video just about these three verbs? Well, that's because all of these verbs can be translated as know in English, and sometimes it's confusing for foreigners to know which one of these they should use. So in this video, I'm going to take each one of them one at a time and explain the general rules for when you should use it. Let's start with Þekkja. So the rules are you use Þekkja generally with people, places, and films, books, songs, or really anything that you can be familiar with, because that's really what Þekkja means. It means that you're familiar with something. And the last rule, really just something to remember, is that Þekkja is rarely used with dependent clauses, and I'll explain what that means in a minute. So let's start with people. Let's look at some examples. Ég þekki systur þína means I know your sister. When we're talking about knowing a person, we use Þekkja. And that's the same in a lot of languages. We have a different word for knowing a person and knowing a thing, knowing something. Another example is Þekkirðu þennan mann, which means do you know this man? Or hún hefur þekkt mig í mörg ár. She has known me for many years. You can also use Þekkja with places, such as hún þekkir svæðið vel, means she knows the area well. Or Einar þekkti landið eins og lófan á sér, means Einar knew the land like the palm of his hand. So when we're talking about being familiar with a place that we know because of experience, we can use Þekkja. Also with films, books, or anything else that you can learn about and be familiar with. For example, Þekkirðu þetta lag means do you know this song, meaning have you heard it before? Or Ég þekki þessa sögu means I know this story. I'm familiar with it. I know what happens in it. There are really a lot of things that you can use Þekkja with, but just remember that generally it means that you're familiar with something. And the last rule to look at is that Þekkja is rarely used with dependent clauses, meaning you rarely connect it to another clause with að, like Ég þekki að, I know that. That doesn't happen very often. Here's one example. If you want one, take a look at it. But I wouldn't worry too much about sentences like this. They're not very common. All right, let's move on to Vita. We use Vita when we're talking about facts, something that is or isn't true, and it is very often used with a dependent clause, which we'll see some examples of. So here are some facts or ways that you can use Vita with facts. You can say Þeir vita allt Grænland, which means they know everything about Greenland. We're talking about information, facts. Vitið þið nöfn þeirra? Do you know their names? Or hún veit sannleikann, she knows the truth. And finally, ég vissi það just means generally I knew that. I knew that information, I knew that fact. You'll see this often used with dependent clauses. Ég veit að, for example. In this one, ég veit að þér leiðist í skóla means I know that you get bored in school. This is a fact or a piece of information that I know. Vissi hún að þú ætlaðir að mæta? Did she know that you were going? Now, when I say that it's a fact, it doesn't mean that, everyone believes it or accepts it as a fact. It just means that the person who's speaking believes that they're speaking from their knowledge about a fact. So Vita is really used a lot in Icelandic, and so is Þekkja. Þekkja is more used with people or things that you're familiar with, and Vita is used for facts and information. I'd like to go over the last one now, Kunna, which is also a very common word, but has a very specific meaning. So here's when to use it. You use it with skills, knowing how to do something. You also use it when referring to languages or specific words, or when you're talking about a text or something that you have memorized. So let's look at some examples of skills. This sentence, kanntu að mála, means do you know how to paint? Kunna is often confusing for English speakers as well as speakers of other Scandinavian languages because it looks like it means can, like can you paint? But that's really not what it means at all. It means do you know how to paint? It's possible that someone knows how to paint but can't because they're blind or because they have broken their hand. So make sure you always remember that kunna is used for the know-how part and geta is used for can or be able to. Here's another example. Hún kann ekki að dansa means she doesn't know how to dance. Alright, you also use kunna with languages and words. For example, hun kan smá spænsku means she knows a little Spanish. Now, you can also say hun talar smá spænsku, she speaks a little Spanish, but kan is used specifically to say that she knows it, or she has learned it. Kantu íslensku? This is a very common question you might get. Do you know Icelandic? It's not very different from asking talartu íslensku? Do you speak Icelandic? It's just asking more about whether you've learned it versus whether you speak it. We also use kunna with talking about words that you've learned in a language, for example, like ég kann ekki orðið á íslensku. This means I don't know the word in Icelandic. So this is what you would use if you're trying to speak Icelandic and you've forgotten the word or you never learned it and you want to tell the person, hey, I don't know this word in Icelandic. You'd say ég kann ekki orðið á íslensku. Now you also use kunna with text that you've memorized. For example, hann kunni lagið means he knew the song or he knew the words to the song. This is a little bit different than hann þekkti lagið, which means he was familiar with the song, he knew the song. Hún kann textan utan að just means she knows the text by heart. It means that she has it memorized. It's more than just being familiar with it. It means that you've actually learned it. Now, before I wrap up this video, I'd like to mention that there are ways to use að kunna that we haven't discussed in this video at all, and it can mean something completely different in other contexts. But in this video, I'm just talking about when to use kunna to mean to know. And these are the rules that I just showed you. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Please feel free to leave comments or questions below. And I hope you have a nice day. Bless, bless.